Americans have long been accustomed to purchasing low-priced clothing made in countries like China and other parts of Asia. In fact, about 97% of the clothes and shoes sold in the U.S. are imported, with China being the largest source of these imports. However, this landscape is changing as the global apparel manufacturing industry shifts, and so are the challenges faced by U.S. companies trying to compete. While China remains the largest supplier of apparel to the U.S., its market share has been shrinking over the past 15 years. This shift is driven by the growing production in countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, and India, where labor costs are much lower. Gambert, an American clothing manufacturer, faces stiff competition from factories in these countries, which have become the go-to destinations for low-cost apparel production.
We're definitely getting a lot more testing the waters of domestic manufacturing. Just this morning I received an email from somebody we made shirts for 20 years ago that used to work with my father here. And they said, hey, we'd be interested in maybe getting into a little bit of small batch production again with you. There's, over the last probably 6 months since November simply, we've definitely gotten a lot more interest in domestic production again. It certainly seems to be a hot topic in the industry.
One of the significant challenges for U.S. clothing manufacturers like Gambert is the increase in material costs due to tariffs imposed under the Trump administration. As China is the biggest source of U.S. fabric imports, the additional tariffs on Chinese goods have led to an 18% increase in the cost of materials like buttons, cloth, and zippers. This price hike is affecting not only the manufacturers but also the overall pricing of U.S.-made clothing.
Just to talk about buttons in particular, we source right now from China 100% of our buttons because there is no domestic supply chain for American-made buttons. So there's no other option for me to go. The first initial 10% increase was combined with an 8% increase on the side of China. So my prices went up 18%, which basically translates to about a $5,400 per order extra charges in just buttons alone. With the concept of another 10%, I'm probably looking at another $2,500 on top of everything else that's going on per order.
The decline of U.S. apparel manufacturing has been evident since 1990. Over the past 3 decades, the industry has seen a dramatic shift as brands and retailers move production overseas to countries with cheaper labor, including China, Vietnam, and Bangladesh.
We feel a lot of pressure from China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, India. It's definitely a global market.
A recent report by allamerican.org shows that only about 2.5% of the apparel purchased in the U.S. is domestically produced, and the number of American apparel manufacturing jobs has fallen from over 900,000 in 1990 to fewer than 100,000 today. The primary reason behind this decline is the stark wage gap between U.S. and overseas workers. While an American apparel worker earns an average hourly wage of $15 to $20, workers in Bangladesh and Vietnam often earn less than $1 per hour. This wage differential, combined with lower regulatory costs abroad, has created a significant incentive for companies to offshore production to these low-wage countries. For U.S. manufacturers like Gambert, the labor costs are a big issue. In his factory, about 90% of the 100 workers earn more than New Jersey's $15.49 minimum wage. However, with each increase in the state's minimum wage, employees earning more than the minimum wage expect their salaries to rise proportionally. This creates a pressure on businesses to balance wage increases with profitability, especially when competing against overseas manufacturers with much lower labor costs.
Everything's more expensive in the United States, I think. Labor for sure. I mean, there's a living wage, and it's fair and it's right. And I mean, out of 100 people, maybe 10 people in our shop are at the minimum wage level. The issue with the labor rates is every time there's an increase on a state level, if somebody's making the minimum wage and they go up 50 cents, somebody that's making $21 expects to go up 50 cents as well. So it's not like they're just saying, oh, well, let the minimum wage people go up only. So labor is certainly an issue.
The cost of materials plays a significant role in the price of US-made clothing. As Ferrara, another industry insider, explains, manufacturing inputs are divided into two key categories, labor and materials. For his company, 70% of the costs are attributed to labor, and 30% to materials.
We live and die by the cost sheet, which means how much does it cost to make a jacket, a fine tailored jacket. And when we look at manufacturing inputs, there are two main inputs. The first input is labor. The second input is materials. 70% of what we make here is labor. 30% is material.
This reliance on labor-intensive processes is one reason why U.S. companies like Ferrara's are in favor of Trump's additional tariffs, as they believe it gives them a competitive edge against foreign-made goods.
A reduction in the corporate tax rate from 21% to 15% solely for companies that make their product in America. You have to make your product in America.
While some in the industry support the additional tariffs on Chinese imports, there are concerns about tariffs on products from Mexico and Canada. Kim Glass, the president of the National Council of Textile Organizations, believes that tariffs on these neighboring countries hurt U.S. textile industries that rely on sending cotton, wool, yarn, and fabric across borders for various stages of manufacturing. She advocates for a more measured approach, calling for the exemption of qualifying USMCA goods from penalty tariffs and for closing loopholes, such as the de minimis rule, which allows certain goods to enter the U.S. without inspection or tariffs. As the U.S. clothing manufacturing industry continues to face challenges, including rising material costs, tariffs, and labor pressures, domestic manufacturers must navigate a complex global market. With the industry's future at stake, the debate over tariffs and manufacturing practices is far from over. Whether or not U.S. apparel manufacturers can reclaim market share from overseas competitors will depend on a variety of factors, including international trade policies, labor costs, and how the industry adapts to the changing global landscape.